Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Road to Recovery podcast. This podcast is a platform for education, discussion, and conversations on mental health. I'm your host, Amira Shah, and in this podcast, you'll get to know more about the therapeutic process, insight into life from the perspective of the psyche, and also join me in exploring current issues with other practitioners. I specialize in grief, but I'm always interested in learning about the human experience of the mind, heart, and spirit. So join me on this journey of in-depth learning about ourselves and the world we live in. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Science of the Soul. Today I have with me Isiah McKimmie. Isiah is a couples therapist, a sex therapist, a sexologist, you're going to have to tell me what the difference is, and coach who has been helping women and couples discover deeper intimacy and desire for over a decade. She's one of the most qualified sex and relationship experts in Australia. She has a master's degree in relational psychotherapy and a master's degree in science in medicine, sexual counseling, and psychosexual therapy. Wow, that's a mouthful. A postgrad diploma of sexology and a certificate from the prestigious Institute for the Advanced Studies of Human Sexuality. This is all in Australia?
No, the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality was in San Francisco. Everything else was in Australia.
Wow. Okay. So you've worked with thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
You write a popular weekly advice column on sex and relationships, which is news.com under the Relationship Rehab column.
Yeah, that's right.
And you are also a lecturer to others studying couples therapy. You've built your reputation on sharing practical tools and getting results for your clients. And I guess your ethos would be feeling privileged to be able to make a difference in people's relationships and lives.
Exactly.
Which is very noble. So tell me a little bit about your work and the difference between a sexologist and a sex therapist.
Okay, so I know that's a confusing one. A sexologist is someone who studies sex. So someone who has studied sex at postgraduate level.
Okay.
However, someone who is a sexologist can go into different fields. So you can be a research sexologist, you can be a writer and be a sexologist. You can be a sexologist who also does occupational therapy, for example, or works with people with disabilities. So I'm more of a clinical sexologist and a sex therapist. In order to call yourself a sex therapist, you need to have a qualification in therapy, which I do, and then also have qualifications in working with people around sexual challenges, which is the master's in science of medicine, sexual health that I have.
Oh my gosh, I'm feeling very inadequate right now, but also in awe. So put my crushed ego aside. So you've been doing this for about a decade.
Yeah, a bit longer, nearly 15 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's quite a while.
Yeah.
And what are the most common issues that come up?
So I mostly see couples, but I work with individuals as well. So I see couples who are experiencing challenges, like not being able to overcome arguments together, finding that they go around in circles when they're trying to talk about difficult topics. Couples who are having challenges in the bedroom as well. For example, they have different desire levels. Perhaps one person isn't really enjoying themselves in the bedroom, or they might have other challenges like difficulty reaching orgasm, erectile dysfunction, or premature ejaculation. The singles or the individuals that I work with have often noticed that they're struggling with sexual confidence or the confidence to go into a relationship. So I help them with all of those issues.
Okay, so you do relational work essentially, whether it is within the individual's selves and also within themselves and with their significant others. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the first part, the first group of people that you work with, what is one of the most prevalent issues that come up?
So mismatched desire levels is overall the most common issue that I work with people around. Yeah.
Okay.
So couples who, and it's really normal for couples to have different desire levels around sex, especially as, they have children, work gets busy, they've got so many things to juggle in life. That's really normal, but it can also be really challenging to know how to deal with that. So it becomes a real issue in a relationship where one person ends up feeling frustrated or unloved and the other person doesn't know how to perhaps express that or connect, and it becomes like really a source of tension between a couple.
So what are some of the emotions that come up?
So for the person that has the higher desire, there's a lot of feeling of rejection, of frustration, of hurt, of sadness. They want to connect in that really kind of special way with their partner. For the person who has the lower desire, they often feel really guilty. And they also feel frustrated. They feel frustrated with themselves that they can't find that desire. They often feel frustrated with their partner, that their partner keeps asking for something that they're not sure how to give them, and they can feel sad as well. There's often a lot of anxiety there too, because they worry about what's going to happen to the relationship if they can't find that desire that their partner wants.
And I imagine these, while they sound very specific, I imagine they're quite... that they apply to all age groups.
Absolutely.
As well. Like I can see different scenarios across early adulthood or right after the honeymoon period, basically after honeymoon period, stretching all the way up into the golden years.
Absolutely. So I've worked with couples in their 20s all the way through to couples in their 60s who have struggled with this. Some of them have been arguing about it literally for 20 or 30 years. And it's that's why it's such a privilege to be able to work with couples to actually start to shift that. So it's not the elephant in the room. It's not the thing that's causing them tension anymore. Sex then becomes joy in the relationship and a really beautiful way for them to connect.
So you're saying that, I guess, talking about it, naming it, takes the anxiety away or brings it down a notch.
Yeah, so there's always 3 really important areas that I work on with couples. The first one is connection, which is things like staying good friends, having fun together, sharing appreciation, making sure they just feel loved and respected by each other and really close to each other. The next area is communication. So we need the foundation of connection to be able to communicate really well. So communication is such a big issue in any relationship. It really can determine, it's not what couples argue about, it's how that determines the happiness of their relationship. And most of us aren't taught how to do that well. Most of us don't know how to express ourselves well. We're not necessarily taught how to listen, and we can either avoid conflict or end up having arguments about it, neither of which are helpful. But there's really clear ways that we can talk about issues, even issues that are difficult, that actually bring us closer together. And so when couples can learn to talk about sex really well and talk about how it feels for each of them, they're then better able to work on the issue as a team together. And that's when we really start to look in depth at the final important area in a relationship, which is sexual intimacy. And then we can do really fun, practical exercises, things that help them connect physically, enjoy themselves more in the bedroom, and just feel closer that way. And then that feeds back into more overall connection in their relationship.
It's a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
But there is foundational work to be done. So first you need to connect with each other, so maintain that friendship. So what if you have that friendship, you do have a strong connection, but the elephant in the room is still almost like a taboo topic, or just really difficult to, it's like marbles in your mouth.
Well, sex is such a taboo topic. Most of us weren't taught how to talk about sex.
Yeah.
It's a really challenging issue. There's often a lot of worry about it and anxiety. And most of us have shame around sex as well, because there are all these cultural messages we get about it. So even couples who might have had sex together can really struggle to talk about it. And when there's so much emotion going on around it because they feel rejected and guilty and worried, it becomes even harder. So it is really hard to talk about, and that's really part of what my job is as a couples therapist and sexologist, is to help people have these conversations in a really safe way so that they can understand each other, and then we can take practical steps together.
So how do you diffuse, say for example, a moment in the clinic with your clients, which would be a couple in this case? How do you bridge that first step towards getting them to say these things? Because I can imagine it, like you haven't said it for years or months, or probably years for a lot of people. You just don't even know how to utter them. It's like suddenly your mouth muscles just don't work.
Yeah.
How do you bridge that?
Well, it's a really good question, and that's some of why therapy takes time, right? We don't solve everything in the first session. I mean, I wish we could as therapists, and I'm sure you wish that as well.
Magic wand.
But it does take time, because this is built up over time, so it takes time as well. One of the first places that I start with couples, and I ask this right from the very first time I speak to a couple, is what are their positive goals? Like, where do they want to get to? Because good couples therapy and good relationships are not just about focusing on the problems. Actually, we need to have more positive than negative, and really focus on the positives as well. So if we can start by looking at where they want to get to, how a couple wants to feel together, and that's often easier to put into words, then we've got a better chance of getting there. So that's one of the really kind of first steps that we take. And then very early on, when I'm working with couples, I actually do short sessions individually, so people get a chance to put things into words to me that they might struggle to say to each other, or that they've been worried about saying because they don't want to hurt the other person. So they talk about it with me, and that helps break that barrier of putting some of it into words.
It's almost like practice. It's like a trial run. Like, now they've said it out loud, they're just with you, and then maybe they might be able to, muster up the courage to say it with a third person in the room, which is probably someone they share a room with most of the time.
Absolutely. And I'm going to support them to do that in therapy as well. And the thing is, when couples start sharing with each other, what they end up saying is, well, I've never really put that into words to my partner before. And the partner will say, yeah, but I kind of knew that. They already have an idea.
I mean, body language.
Absolutely. Right? And usually they know each other so well. They know what's going on, but neither of them have been able to say it. So ultimately, it can feel like a relief to finally be able to put it into words, because they've both had an idea that it's there anyway.
Yeah. And I can imagine for extended periods of time, there is this tug of war between frustration, disappointment, and expectations, going back and forth whenever they find themselves in a space of intimacy, for example. And that can be insufferable. So to an extent, because sometimes I see more individual clients than couples, and when I hear these stories, it's like there's such a huge barrier in getting there to be able to voice what they need to voice. And also the other person, the other partner, the spouse, may not be receptive to couples counseling, which is, that like, this is where I hit like my barriers most of the time. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, it's really hard. It's really not uncommon for one person to want to come to therapy more than the other. I probably see less of that because I'm a couples therapist and a sexologist. So, really, it's really common for one person to want to work more on the emotional side of the relationship, the other person to want to work more on the sexual side of the relationship. So they both feel like they're getting their needs met by coming to talk to me. But there is very often resistance. There's very often a reluctance to come and talk about it. People can feel like they should just be able to figure it out on their own. And, there's almost no area of our lives where we think we should be able to figure it out on our own.
It's not like we watch our parents figure it out in front of us.
Right. Everything else we learn, if we want to be really good at finances, we just go and get advice about it. I'm asking my accountant questions all the time. I'm seeking out information. I'm getting someone to do it for me. Parenting, that's, another area where we've often thought we've got to figure it out alone. And now we're realizing, there's actually a whole lot of value. But, if you wanted to be good at golf, you would go out and you would get lessons, you would learn. So I think we have to get past this idea that we should be able to do it on our own. And the other kind of really common, I think, myth or belief that gets in the way of couples reaching out is, we're not that bad. And I think it's really important for couples to know it doesn't have to be that bad. You can come and see someone because you want to keep things on track, or just because you're noticing things that need help. It takes most couples an average of 7 years from when they first start experiencing problems to when they eventually get to therapy.
Are you serious?
7 years. And obviously in that time, things are getting worse. The tension, the resentment, the distance is building up. So if you can get in there earlier, it's actually the really smart, efficient step to take. But I also understand that therapy can feel really scary and there can be some reluctance. So we also, take things step by step. I always want my clients to make change fast when they're seeing me. But what's more important to me is that they make change that lasts. And so sometimes we need to slow things down so that they can really, really kind of get it and that they can embed the changes in their lives that are going to last well beyond the time they spend with me in therapy.
So that the slowing things down allows for the experiential learning that they have together, and then that can, I guess, further crystallize or solidify whatever that they've learned and positive feedback loop again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the third part, we talked about communication. What about the third part? In terms of sexual intimacy, what are the main concerns that come up usually?
I know this is not a very sexy answer to that question, but I'm going to share it anyway. We know through research that the thing that makes the biggest difference to a couple's sexual satisfaction is being able to talk about sex. That's the biggest factor, because when they can talk about sex together, it's no longer the elephant in the room. They can talk together about what they'd like to try, about what feels good for them, about what doesn't, about, trying something new together and keeping the variety and curiosity alive. So that's often where we start. Around sexual intimacy. Let's open up the conversation about this. So it's not the elephant in the room. So we can start to work out what's going to work for both people around this. And then depending on what the particular challenges might be, we might go over some touch exercises, for example, so that they can go and do some fun homework where they discover how each other likes to be touched, where they get to try new things in the bedroom. Or we might do just sex education where they can each understand how their bodies work. And, for example, that women's bodies need at least 20 minutes of foreplay in order to fully prepare for sex. So, and that's something that couples can kind of skip over when they get really busy, or, you know, when they're not enjoying sex very much. It's like, oh, let's just get to, you know, what they think is like the main event, and then it can be done. But they're really kind of diminishing both partners' pleasure when they do that. So sharing information like that, and then helping couples work out what they might like to do for foreplay, or different things that they might like to try in the bedroom is part of it as well.
So how do these conversations take place with you in the room? Like, I'm trying really hard to imagine someone saying, well, you know, I really like it when you do this to me, and then you're there and you're like, okay, how do you feel about this? Did you enjoy doing that to her? How does it go?
It's so normal for me now to like hear all kinds of things around couple sex lives, but also some of those more intimate conversations I would, for example, give when any couple starts working with me, they get a couples playbook, and it's this really like great book that I've put together with all the different exercises that couples can do.
I'm buying a copy.
Okay. I'm gonna have to give you one.
Thank you.
And in the section around sexual intimacy, there's questions to ask each other around, what's your favorite position around sex? What's our favorite thing that we've done together so far? How do you really like to be touched? How do you like to touch me? Do you ever struggle with orgasm? What can I do to support you in that? So some of those more intimate conversations they will often have at home,
right? And
then they'll come back and I do get intimate details of people's sex lives. It's an enormous privilege. For me,
it's so private.
We so often can't talk about it. But what I do hear my clients say, and someone said this to me even yesterday, is that my comfort levels with it, because I talk about it as if it's anything else in their lives, helps them feel really comfortable around it as well.
Okay, so you're modeling, and your general approach to it is basically teaching them that
absolutely
it's okay.
It's very
permission.
Absolutely, yeah. Permission is a really big part of it, and it's really practical and kind of straightforward to me in a lot of ways. But I know that it's hard if you haven't had these conversations before.
And what I'm sensing is that there is that clinical style approach here where it is factual and you say it as it is. But at the same time, there's a lot of appreciation around the sensitivity and the relational aspect. So this, I'm starting to see why they're different things and how you've blended them together into, your expertise and how you specialize in this area. And how did you actually fall into this field?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question.
I've been dying to ask you this.
I don't think I've shared this with you before.
But I have thought about it.
So, look, to be really honest, I had always been fascinated by sex. And I, went traveling when I was 18. I explored Europe. I had a number of sexual experiences, and I really liked sex. I knew that it was something that I enjoyed. At the same time, I felt like I was missing out on whatever it was that made sex amazing. There were ways that I always felt like I was holding myself back. And then in my early 20s, I ended up at a music festival in Australia, and there were some workshops, kind of alongside this festival, and there was a Tantra workshop. So Tantra, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, is the sexy kind of yoga, and Sting kind of credits yoga for helping him have sex for 9 hours and have really mind-blowing orgasms. For me, Tantra was the first time I felt like I had really been given permission, that word again, to enjoy sex. That I didn't have to feel guilty about it or feel ashamed about it, that it was okay, and also that sex could actually be a spiritual experience. And that felt so right to me that I wanted to keep exploring it. I ended up teaching, and then not long after I started teaching, a psychologist saw me teach and asked if I would work with his male clients who were experiencing erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation.
Right.
And teach them the practical things that I had learned through Tantra. So mindfulness, breath work, how to connect with a partner, how to touch a partner. And doing that work, I really came to see just how much challenges with intimacy can impact our entire lives. And I also realized that it was a way that I could positively impact people and make them happier was by helping them have better sex, fix challenges around sex, and then have better relationships as a result. And so that's when I went back to university. It took me a couple of years to really see that there was a career in it because I hadn't heard of sex therapy. Sex toys and Tantra were not kind of what they are in the world now, like 15 years ago. So that's when I went back. I wanted to make sure that I was trauma informed. I wanted to make sure that I could support a couple. That's when I went back and did my master's and the postgraduate diploma.
Wow. Okay. So you were really passionate and you were really focused because you were sold.
Yeah.
So you were hooked into the practice and all that. And sorry?
No, and it had made such a difference to my own life, to my own confidence, removing shame around sex, and just enjoying myself more in the bedroom. But it also was a way that I wanted to touch people's lives.
Well, that sounds really noble. And I really liked how there is a practical aspect to it and a spiritual aspect to it. And it makes me think about how intimacy is so emotional and emotions are so linked to spirituality for those that, find that important, and how sex can be such a spiritual experience that you have with somebody. And at the same time, there are some tools that you can use. There are techniques that you can use to get you there. Kind of like meditation. It's like, to get there, you have to learn how to breathe a certain way and regulate your flow and all sorts of things. Center yourself, ground yourself. Similarly, there are techniques towards being in union with someone.
Yes.
So it's like both of them have to be somewhat informed. And then, you can go to take things further or higher and be in unison in a completely different plane.
Exactly. It's both. It's like bridging between the worlds.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Science of the Soul. This is a short interruption to let you know that if you or someone you know are in need of more support, you can find me at Road to Recovery on my Facebook page, my Instagram, or my website at aroadtorecovery.org. I hope you've enjoyed listening so far, and now let's get back to the podcast.
I want to ask you a little bit about being trauma-informed. I think that's really important. And I think, from what I've learned, however, little it is in this particular area in terms of how being sexually comfortable and feeling safe in the bedroom with your trusted partner can have positive ripple effects and healing effects in your life and relationships and just everything else. So can you talk a little bit about how that kind of have that domino effect?
Well, we know that safe, secure relationships help us feel safer and more secure as human beings, and then that changes the way we interact with the world. That allows us to take more risks, to see other people more positively, to feel like it's easier to go through life. So when I'm working with a couple to improve their relationship or sex life, I'm really looking to bring that stability and that safety and security, knowing that it impacts them as a couple, but also any children that they have, their immediate family, and then that ripples out to our communities. I'm also aware, and this is part of the wanting to be trauma informed, that sex is a really sensitive topic, and I always want to be really mindful, especially when someone has had past negative experiences around that we're doing that in a really safe way, because if we just force ourselves, and for some people who lose their desire, their kind of way of trying to deal with it can be, oh, just do it anyway, or and that just ultimately doesn't work. It just creates a build-up.
Yeah.
So it also comes back to me wanting couples to make change fast, but actually wanting them to make change that's sustainable. And so sometimes that just means taking small steps so that both partners feel really comfortable and safe and know that they can say no every step of the way, so that long term they have a really solid foundation around sex.
Have you ever asked a couple to take sex off the table?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. To remove the pressure?
Yeah, when it's really volatile, it's not forever, and I'm always really careful to say that, but absolutely, just for the next little while we're working through some of these challenges, let's just take it off. Let's just take the pressure off it. Yeah.
Okay, so slowing down can look like going backwards a little bit, but it is to be able to afford for growth.
Yes.
That has been missed in that area.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about being pressured to perform sexual acts, and when you've had negative experiences, or for whatever reasons, it makes me think about yes, of course, when there's been things like rape or grooming and things like that, that's happened. Usually it happens when you are vulnerable and in an unsafe environment, and your trust has been shattered. So do you refer certain individuals from the couple to get like trauma counseling?
Yeah, it really depends on where they're at in their healing journey. Around that, some couples find that they feel like they've worked on a certain issue, but it's actually there a little bit more than they realized. I think there's a lot of value on working on those kind of challenges within a couple dyad. But very often, for a whole range of reasons, I'll recommend that one or both partners go and get individual therapy as well, because I think couples therapy and individual therapy can be really great supports for each other, just depending on what's going on.
Yeah, because they do complement in very different ways, but very powerfully.
Absolutely.
And I also wanted to ask you this other thing. I'm just writing notes as we speak.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about psychoeducation or psychosexual education when couples get older and bodies change. What are some of the myths or expectations? Because I've done a project on this, and I've created a treatment manual back in the day for mature couples when they start to transition into different physiological stages, and what to expect and how to deal with each other. But there was many I wouldn't even call them moons, like earth rotations ago. So yeah, can you tell us a few things that come to mind?
Yeah, and I would love to hear anything that you have to add on this as well.
If I can remember.
Look, I think one of the biggest things around sex and aging is a belief that we get to a certain age, and particularly for women, right, that we get to a certain age and then we're just not sexual anymore, or we're not interested in sex anymore. And we just know that that is not necessarily true. And in fact, for women, we know that if women get into a new relationship at any age, their desire spikes
Really?
massively. So it's the long-term relationships. Actually, if you're in a long-term relationship, we do find that desire kind of plateaus and dips or flatlines for some people. But if a woman gets into a new relationship, her desire spikes.
Okay.
So firstly, I think what we have to know is that it is possible to continue to enjoy a really satisfying sex life all the way through your life. That's the first thing, that we can have that mindset. Sexuality and how we enjoy it will change throughout our lives, and it will change for different periods in our lives, and it will of course change as we age. So some of those things, particularly for women, as our hormone balance changes, we don't lubricate as much. The skin around the vagina atrophies, so it becomes thinner, so it can be more painful. We tend to have kind of diminished sexual pleasure in some ways, and it can be harder to reach orgasm. Doesn't mean that it's not possible or that it's not still enjoyable, or that we don't still enjoy all the other amazing aspects of sex, like closeness and emotional intimacy as well. For men, function also changes as they age. So for men at 50, there's a 50% chance that they will experience erectile dysfunction. At 60, it's 60%, 70, it's 70%, 80, it's 80%.
So why do you call it dysfunction if it's
actually normal? That's such a great question. It's such a great question.
I hate that word. Let's never use that again.
And as I was, fantastic. And as I was saying to someone yesterday, an inability to get an erection or to keep an erection doesn't mean that you can't still feel incredible pleasure. And for so many women, it's like they will say, I don't mind if he has an erection or not. Let's do other things. Like, amazing. Let's take that off the table. Let's pleasure each other in other ways. So again, that kind of mindset shift to perhaps changing the way you see sex or changing some of the beliefs you have about sex, you can still enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so curious to hear if you would. I mean, they're the things. There's obviously maybe some more detail, but they're the kind of most important things that come up for me. I'm so curious about what you remember. Yeah.
I remember the 80-20 rule, which is expect for 20% of the time that either of you may not finish.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. And if it just, one or the other is having obstacles, or something happens and it's hard to continue, to just lay down together and talk, and cuddle, and just other forms of intimacy that doesn't have to be penetrational.
Absolutely.
If that's even a word. But it could just be closeness. I remember learning about taking time. So actually not expecting things to happen like it used to when couples were younger. Just giving more time to each other, because not that it's not like they don't want it or they can't get there. It's just that the body takes a while.
Absolutely.
As you get older, physiologically.
And that's so important for women, particularly as they don't lubricate the way unrealistic expectations of how quickly women should lubricate or how lubricated they should be a lot of the time anyway. But certainly as we age, and I include myself in that, lubrication changes. So, and absolutely, like, adding something in like a lubricant at any age can enhance pleasure, but especially if the skin feels delicate. So time is, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, time. And now that you talked about lubrication, I remember writing in my report, my treatment manual, that to use aids, and they're not really not to actually think about them as aids, but more like compliments. Compliments to the act of intimacy. Just because you are older, but you got older together.
Yeah.
Which is something to think about, not to keep looking back. I was able to do this and be attached to some form of performance that was achieved or attained like a decade ago. But to recognize that, you know, you're human and that you do change, you are aging, like you probably have children, they've grown, they've gone through puberty. What makes you think you'll still be, you know, like you biologically you've passed, you know, reproductive ages, and we live so much longer now. So I guess putting it in perspective in an existential level and a more like and looking at the marriage and the relationship rather than that as a singular event. That was what I remember taking away from actually creating that manual, that everything becomes normalized, that you can't expect that to be the same because like this many years have passed.
Absolutely. Like our bodies change in so many different ways. And of course they change sexually as well. I think the AIDS is like a really good, another really good point, whether it's like sex toys or, you know, toys to help erection or reach orgasm, or even just pillows or, you know, wedges that you can get to support the body, because the body doesn't, you know, kind of even like being on your knees for a certain period of time gets harder when you age. But there's a whole lot out there now that can support that as well.
I didn't even think of that. Rug burns. And such.
And just painful, painful knees. So you get some pillows, you get, I mean, and they're great for anyone because you can use pillows to help you get different angles, better angles, and support the body so the body doesn't have to be holding itself up where, if it might struggle to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, well, I think we're learning a lot together so far. I wanted to ask you another thing, two other things that just came to mind while we were speaking. And the first one is, what is your take on love languages?
Oh, yeah. So I think they can be really useful. I've seen them be really, really useful to a lot of couples that I've worked with, and I've heard a lot of great reports about them. I think the thing that I'm cautious of around love languages is that it is not necessarily a fix-all in a relationship.
Right.
So I work partly with the Gottman method of couples therapy. So that's 40 years of research on what works in relationships and what kind of predicts the end of a relationship. And love languages fits into a part of that, which is turning towards each other, knowing each other's needs, but we still need to learn how to communicate, how to repair after an argument. We have to continue to get to know each other. It's one part of a healthy relationship, and it can be really useful, but there's also more that we have to remember to look at.
So are you talking about all the love languages? What if someone comes around and says that, you know, my wife's love language is touch, but mine isn't? How do you navigate that? Is it something you can learn, bridge?
So my questions would be around, okay, so how is this showing up in the relationship, and what are the underlying emotions and relational needs that are there? Let's talk about those. Let's bring those out into the open, and then ultimately I think it's going to be more than that's my love language and he doesn't do that. I think there's going to be more going on than just that. But we would start by talking about it and then find more ways that they can connect and communicate with each other so that they're both feeling really, really loved. Often the things that we think we want to help us feel loved don't actually necessarily get to the deepest levels that we want them to. And so couples will often kind of describe, oh, my partner said they wanted all these things, but then it feels like the goalposts keep changing. It's because there's a deeper relational need that isn't being met that we have to get to. But that's really hard often to figure out on our own. We just know that we want to feel more loved, and we think this is the way to do it. So, part of my role is to really help couples dig down and look and get to the core of what's going on.
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned this. I've had this floating around in my head from time to time, that the 5 love languages that we know, which is here.
Acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, gift giving, and words of affirmation. Oh gosh.
Touch, no?
Yes, touch. Thank you.
So that's I lost myself there because I know my love language is food, and it's not one of the 5.
But it is an act of service.
Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, no, I get it now. But I always thought that they were just ways to identify and communicate. I never found them diagnostically useful.
No, you're right. They're not a whole relationship theory or diagnostic tool. They're a useful tool, but
it's like a starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And what is... So you see couples, and where does monogamy, polygamy, open relationships, and infidelity, how do they play out in your practice?
Oh, wow. That is
do you see that?
Huge question. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know that relationships don't need to be monogamous to have safety and to have longevity. And I think if couples don't want to choose to be monogamous, that is a really valid decision. And I've still worked with couples who've made that decision for themselves. I think the really clear difference between any kind of open relationship and polyamory and infidelity is the way that that's openly discussed. So infidelity is another relatively common topic that shows up in couples therapy, and it is possible for couples to work through that. I've worked with a number of couples who have either experienced infidelity in the past or have recently experienced infidelity and want to repair their relationship. That's a huge kind of topic to talk about, but I am really passionate that couples can have different forms of relationship that work for them, and it's not up to me to tell them what their relationship should look like. It's my role to give them the tools so that their relationship is the best that it can be.
You're right.
Infidelity is something that couples can overcome, and there's so much shame that goes along with that. Shame for the person who cheated, shame for the person who stays, even though they've been cheated on. There's a whole lot for couples to work through, and it can be done.
Yeah, because if you think about it, trust is, if it's infidelity, so that means one person doesn't know. So trust is broken. It is a traumatic event whenever trust is broken. And then that definitely would affect what happens in the bedroom.
Yes.
So whatever that's not talked about will play out physically. And then it becomes the elephant in the bedroom as well.
Yeah.
And to be able to diffuse that can help reparation. And I remember growing up hearing women. I don't know. I just hear this a lot from women who are older around me. Because I was so young, you just receive implicit messages. I can't pinpoint exactly from who or where, but this was a recurring message that the leopard doesn't change its spots. Or the tiger doesn't change his stripes. Which means once a cheater, always a cheater. And as I've grown older, actually from adolescence onwards, so not necessarily clued in, psychologically or anything, but just experientially, just feeling and thinking through things. I'm like, is that really true? Is that actually really true? Because it's a choice that people make.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I don't think that is a fair kind of statement to make. People make mistakes. People have affairs for a whole lot of reasons, and I have certainly seen couples recover and then go on to have really satisfying, close, connected relationships that where the infidelity doesn't occur again.
And often you see that, like the relational needs are not met, or there's some other suffering down like in the depths of their hearts and souls and minds, and undiscussed, or traumatic events that happened when they were young that they might not have full conscious cognitive control. And it's like, on one hand, yes, there's this responsibility and accountability, and on the other hand, how do you navigate being compassionate and non-judgmental, but also being accountable and responsible? And I can imagine that being quite a hairy thing to work through, but also very rewarding in the process and at the end, the outcome.
Yeah, it is. I mean, any issue that I'm working with a couple on, it's so rewarding to see them reach a level of closeness again that they weren't sure they would ever find again.
Yeah, that is quite wonderful. Do you ever get kids coming in, like the children chiming in, or adult children, or anything like that?
I sometimes get photos of couples that I've worked with who've gone on to have kids, and I'll get a photo,
nice.
a wedding picture or a baby photo. That's always super sweet when I get that.
Because they acknowledged you.
Yeah, and they know. I always say that to couples when they leave. Please keep me updated. Let me know how everything is going. Yeah. And I've been a kind of a part of their lives, so they'll share that with me. It's really special.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And now that you mentioned babies, couples who are trying to conceive but struggling, do you get that as well?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And I often get couples. Sometimes I get couples in the middle of that journey, but very often I get couples a little bit further down the line of that journey. In that, when couples are trying to conceive, and particularly if they're having to, use IVF, and that is such a consuming kind of time for them that. Yeah, their relationship is challenged, sex is challenged, but they don't have a lot of space for dealing with more than conception and then pregnancy and all of those things. So it's often couples where they've had a baby, where they've struggled to conceive, and the baby's now like a couple of years old or a few years older, and essentially there was some ruptures in the relationship that never fully got resolved, or challenges in their sex life that never really got back on track after the hugely emotional time of trying to conceive. So I will work with couples during, but also at the end of that journey, so that they can reconnect their relationship.
Yeah, it is a very consuming process from what I've learned and understood from others and some of my clients as well. And it's just all you think about. You're counting, your consumption. It's like you have to be on a certain diet. You're looking at the calendar. It becomes so clinical, the process, that you lose spontaneity.
Spontaneity. Yeah, spontaneity.
There you go. You lose the magic that you probably once had, because you're hyper focused, and for good reason, because you're probably like putting a lot of money and time into it. which makes me wonder how often, if you can give me like a percentage or one number out of 10, how often do you sense that or refer clients or couples to go to seek medical advice, given their presentations?
Oh, so that's an interesting question. If it's around conception, they usually have done that on their own accord. Sometimes, though, and actually, I have not had this myself, but I know a number of colleagues that have kind of had this challenge. Often with clients who may, for example, be from India. And are living in Australia, the actual mechanics of how sex works or should work is a little bit of a mystery to them. So they'll be really confused as to why they're not getting pregnant, and they'll end up at a sex therapist, like a doctor or fertility specialist will send them back to a sex therapist, and the sex therapist will kind of find that actually they're essentially not having penetrative sex. So that's why they're not becoming pregnant. I sometimes refer for other reasons, like pain during sex. And if someone is showing up with erectile challenges, pain during sex, or there's a kind of a whole range of other things, I'll often ask them to go and see their GP or a gynecologist or a urologist to make sure that the physical things are being taken care of while we work on what might be psychological or emotional as well.
So how often does that usually happen for you?
That's not as common.
Oh, really?
For me. Largely, I'm working with couples who there is not actually a kind of physical challenge. Right. It's arguments or losing desire, not knowing how to enjoy sex, or individuals who are experiencing those challenges as well. But it is something that sex therapists will sometimes work in combination with doctors and gynecologists, pelvic floor physios as well.
Right, yeah, I can imagine. Okay. Well, what advice do you have to give for us listeners? One key takeaway message on how to love yourself more so that you can love the other.
Oh, that's a really good question. But I think that point is a really good one. I think we have to know ourselves in order to have happier and stronger relationships. And part of what I mean by that is really knowing what is happening for us in this moment. What's going on for me? What are my emotions? What are my needs that I'm longing for or that aren't being met? Because only when we know that can we effectively communicate that and send out the bridge to another human being. And that's really the foundation of healthy relationships. So learning to tune into ourselves and know ourselves, know what's going on for us, and then be able to communicate it would kind of be what I would want to send out there as a takeaway message.
So being mindful and slowing down within yourself first.
Yeah.
So you're clear about it, not like being tugged at by emotions and feelings of rejection and all these sort of things.
Yes.
Without knowing what's actually going on for you physiologically and emotionally deep down.
Yes.
How do you tune in with yourself? What do you do?
So for me, meditation. It's a form of meditation. So I have a mantra meditation and a kind of a Hindu ceremony that I do every morning. But I also, knowing that I'm going to be working with a lot of people closely through the day, make sure that I take time to do my self-care, that I eat well, that I spend time walking and not talking to anyone, having kind of silence, being in nature where I can, moving my body, all of those things that allow me to kind of process what's going on and to slow down, to have my nervous system slow down.
So does that equate to, I guess, activating the parasympathetic nervous system to an extent?
Yeah. I think of it as really just calming my nervous system, like really, really working on calming that in the ways that I can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've learned so much. It's been really, really enjoyable, actually.
Yeah, I've loved this. Great questions. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. They just come up as we talk. But no, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really, really appreciate it. We've tried to do this before, but we couldn't get together. But I'm glad you're feeling better now, and we can do this. For those who are listening, Isiah can be reached through her website, which is Isiah McKimmie, so that would be ISIAH-MCKIMMIE.com. Yes, she has a website with her own name. So that's very easy to remember. She's also on Instagram, and her handle is Isiah McKimmie, one word, .sexologist. That's it?
That's right. Yeah.
And if you read the news, like, 10% of the population now. No, I'm joking. If you read the news online, which is everyone, at news.com.au, you write under Relationship Rehab. And how often does that come out?
Every week. Every week, people send me their questions. So, yeah, Relationship Rehab or Isiah McKimmie, and you'll find me fairly easily.
Okay. And do you have space for new clients at the moment?
We have a short waiting list at the moment, but what I'm working on putting together right now is an online course for couples, so I can help serve people that I don't have space to see individually, or people who are not quite sure if they're ready for therapy, or really for those couples who just want to improve what's already good. So there will be a way that I can support you, whether it's in I give away a lot of advice on Instagram, the online course, or in therapy.
Okay, that's great, because if you are proactive and you want to do something about your relationship, or you just want to jazz it up a little bit more, you can actually wait for your online program to come out.
Yes.
Which is awesome. And just go to your Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's all, folks. That's an hour. Thank you very much one last time.
Thank you.